Welcome to the Business Spotlight podcast. My name is Kay Cote, and I'm your host for today's episode. And today on the show, I have Rob Kaminski, co-founder and managing partner of Fletch, as my guest. We're going to be learning about his business, his journey to business ownership, best practices, and challenges that he's faced to give you that inside look to what it's like to build and operate a business. Welcome, Rob. So great to meet you. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me. It should be a bit of fun.
Definitely. Well, before we dive into all things business, I would love to share with the audience a little bit about you. So take me back as far as you'd like. Share a bit about yourself and how you got into business.
For sure. So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I've had a very, I would say, non-linear career path. Got my start in biomedical engineering of all things. Thought I wanted to be a doctor, was working on surgical instrumentation design, and then got really curious about new product development via some exposure to clinical engineering. So I was actually in operating rooms, seeing how different products and cutting edge technologies were created. And I realized I had no clue how they were actually sold. It's like, okay, I kind of have a sense of how these things are built, what to look for. So that pulled me down a couple loops, ended up in business school with a focus on technology commercialization. And then via some advice from a mentor at the time, because I'd always been really curious and passionate about entrepreneurship, he said, hey, if you're really serious about entrepreneurship, go spend time in sales, which to any engineer listeners you have is like the worst thing you could ever hear. But it's wonderful advice. And so it was kind of one of my first career pivots. Uh, Moved into really technical sales engineering for a software company in the healthcare space. Worked my way up into running a small sales team as an account executive before eventually pivoting back to the product side of things. And that's where I discovered this discipline called product marketing, which is sort of mimics the role of a founder. It's sort of seeing between the lines of product development and markets and how you talk about your products, how you build marketing plans and product roadmaps. And that's ultimately where my co-founder and myself decided to build our business. And so we today are a product marketing consultancy. We focus exclusively on strategic positioning for technology B2B companies. And as we were talking earlier on, effectively what happens is these cutting edge technology founders that build something new, they have a really hard time explaining what they do. And so that's what my firm does. They come in, we have a 2 week sprint process that we take them through where we're really helping them figure out what market to play in, what to compare themselves to, and how to articulate their core value propositions.
Wow. Well, that's a cool background, especially you were in operating rooms? What?
Yeah, it's not the normal path. It's really funny, especially in the technology and software space. It's not uncommon to have an uncommon background, but you won't find a lot of surgical instrumentation clinical engineers in the space. And so that's I guess we'll call it my unique beginning, if you will.
Well, talk about setting you up for success when it comes to like a startup or starting a business is like the high pressure of an operating room and the high pressure of business owner life.
For
I can
sure,
see that being an
100%.
asset.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, awesome. So you talked about you have a co-founder. Tell me
Yeah.
about like your role you play in as a co-founder in this business.
Yeah. So my business partner, my co-founder and I effectively have the same role. And so a little bit of context about how we built the business. We actually created it inside of another agency. And the short version of the story is we were basically being deployed as fractional product and marketing leaders for different startups where they would hire us for advice, but all the projects were very custom and different. And when we were on the bench, i.e., not engaged in a project, our task was figuring out how do we sell our strategic services to startups. And so that's where I met my co-founder. We started working on these experimentation projects with outbound and different marketing stuff we could be doing. And through doing that, we ultimately ended up creating this small service. So we started working together hand in hand. And the way we built our whole marketing program, really our whole customer acquisition program, was on top of LinkedIn. And so even to date, I would say 95+% of our customers come inbound via LinkedIn. And so our whole aim was to build an audience of founders and marketers and product leaders, have them raise their hands and engage with the content that we're sharing every day and getting them into effectively our sales process. And to date, we're coming up on 600 B2B startups have gone through our process, again, primarily coming to us inbound, which has been fantastic for the business.
Oh, that's incredible. So LinkedIn marketing has been the main flow,
Oh
right?
yeah, the whole focus, kind of like build an audience and monetize. And in the very beginning, we didn't really even know what type of service we were building. And that's where the audience and LinkedIn and really social media as a product experimentation tool was really helpful for us to even figure out like what should we build. And so we were using our content sort of as an experimentation playground, like what are people struggling with? And then trying to create valuable and entertaining content around those struggles, and then ultimately using that as a jumping off point to actually build our service around it.
Oh, that's incredible. So now is there a currently like a parent company and you're in that company? Is that just
So, good question. We spun out of the agency after a few months. Effectively, the business just started working. And, for those, especially entrepreneurs, we were in a very interesting spot where all the business was coming in through our LinkedIn profiles. We were doing all the work, coming up with all the models. And so at some point, it just sort of hit us of like, why are we doing this here? And in good faith effort, we did have conversations with our founders there of like, hey, what does this look like as a business unit inside of the company? And ultimately, it just wasn't a perfect fit because we were building this service business with much more of a high volume, repeatable, like low cost, high volume, repeatable process approach. So smaller ACV, smaller deals that we could kind of repeat over and over. And their model was much more the big custom projects. So it just wasn't a fit. And so ultimately we left and we've been on our own as an own entity for a little over 3 years, 3.5 years or so.
okay, that's incredible. And that was one question I was going to ask. And it is like, yeah, what inspired that to, that pivot? And it sounds like, yeah, just like the fit and you wanted to see the vision out.
And well, it was fit in this realization. I guess for me going back, I always knew I wanted to build a business. But I think the struggle a lot of like first time entrepreneurs have is like, what business? What's
Yeah.
the idea? What do I do? And especially for someone like myself, I used to see myself very much as a generalist, where my power is in my range. You can put me in any room, technical, sales, whatever, and my background shows that. There's some truth, and that's where my value is, but no one cares. It's like unmarketable. No one wants basically what I was trying to prep myself for was a CEO role, but no one was going to give me a CEO job. And
Yeah.
so the thesis when we were even thinking about, well, what do we build? The only thing we held in our mind is whatever it is, we want it to be really specific and really niche. So very
Yeah.
counterintuitive to how a lot of first-time business owners and founders think about things. They think, I got to keep my options open. Where can I get revenue? I got to keep these doors open. And the counterintuitive, really, effectiveness is that the more specific you go, the easier it is to build repeatable growth and repeatable business. And so that was something I had to grapple with as we were building the business in the early days.
That's like really a golden nugget of this conversation is the niching. It makes such a difference. I think to start very niche and you can always build upon that. So I think that's massive that you did that. That's awesome. Okay, so now I got a kind of a fun question for you as co-founder. If I could give you an extra 10 hours back in your week, where would you put those hours? Would you put them towards business, towards personal life, or like somewhere in the middle?
This is such a great question. They would definitely go towards business. And so my business partner and I, the way we're looking at our business, and we reached an inflection point maybe 18 months ago where the business was working, and actually let me back up for more context. This will fill it in. When we started, effectively our goal was, hey, what does it look like to build $1 million niche business that just the two of us could run? And there were a couple playbooks we were following to get there, which we can dive into. I think they're really interesting. But then we got to that point and we're like, okay, well, what do we do now? Do we run this lifestyle business effectively where we had created these, great jobs for ourselves, but we're still doing the work? Or do we try and fully operationalize the business to something that is an asset that runs without us? We chose door number two. And so what that means for us is as far as work-life balance, we are skewing more towards like, no, we're not trying to just minimize the amount that we work and letting this cash flow. We're trying to figure out how do we structure the business? How do we hire team members, build processes where it can run without us and so that it scales. And so with that in mind, what would I do with 10 hours? I probably would put that time into actually working on the business design. And I think that's going to fall into things like hiring, system design, and processes, because that's the biggest gap we have now. And I say gap, it's the biggest point of discovery and what we're trying to figure out at the moment.
Okay, I thank you for sharing that. Now, what have you felt is the biggest obstacle that's getting you through those like the systems processes and hiring?
Yeah. Um, it's probably the double-edged sword of the way we built the business. And so we built our business on our personal brands, which is a huge leverage point. But then when you reach the point of, hey, now I want to basically get customers and bring in operators that don't have our personal brand, like how do we transition from basically the following that me and my co-founder have on LinkedIn to our company having credibility and a following where a lot of our clients that come to us, they see our content that we're posting on LinkedIn and they go, hey, I want to work with Rob and Anthony. Do I get to work with you? And oftentimes it's like, yeah, sure. And, we tend to book out a little further than our team, but we want to get it to the point of like, well, yeah, you just work with our team, whoever it is. And, not that we go into the shadows, but like our team would come in and do this. And so that's the trickiest point is how do you hire for that? And we basically for the past year have been experimenting with different role types as well as structures. And what I mean by that is on the role types, we weren't sure, and this just gets in more into the context of what we do. Do we hire really sharp communicator and consultants and teach them the positioning and product marketing discipline? Or do we hire really experienced product marketers and teach them our style and process associated to how we consult and how we give advice? So that's been one point of experimentation. And then on the flip side, structurally, are these full-time people or are these more freelance folks, which is a pretty consistent model that we see in the marketing and design space. So for the past year, a little over a year, we've kind of been hiring the assortment of those folks and kind of seeing how it works. Like how much training do we do? What does the program look like? Who can pull it off? And we've learned quite a bit, and now we do have some of those answers. But that's like kind of been the crux of what we've been trying to figure out operationally.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Now you are you working fully with contractors or do you have employees at all?
So we've had both. So
Okay.
full-time employee wise, we're about 5 people with maybe another 7 or so on contract.
Okay.
And what we've learned is that the contract model actually works quite well for our business model. And so what this means for us is we are going to be reducing the kind of employee team size, trying to keep that to 3 or 4, and leveraging more of a fractional model. Um, why that works for us is because what we do is very strategic. So the people that we would even be hiring are very senior. And a lot of those folks, it's not uncommon for them to already have their own consultancy on the side and these very senior roles. And then so giving them the bit of this like flexibility and exposure of like, hey, we'll find a customer for you within our process and then we'll pay you to work with the customer is how we think we're going to grow and scale with limited downside and overhead risk.
Oh, incredible. Now, when it comes to decision making with you and your co-founder, how do you make those decisions, whether it be hiring or anything business related?
Yeah. So we operate by what we call the big baby heuristic. And ultimately, what this boils down to is there's 2 components to it. One, for big decisions, we both have to agree. And so my co-founder and I, our communication style is very direct, very make an argument and convince me style. And we're only going to move forward with big decisions if we're both in alignment. If we're not aligned, there's room for experimentation for one of us to go and try something on a smaller scale. And then the big baby heuristic comes in when, thousands of decisions that you're making where it could go either way. It's kind of like whoever is going to be the big baby about it. So it's like we get into these points. It's like clearly you have a passion for this decision. You're the big baby. We're okay. You made the decision. I support you in that. Great. It's yours. That's for usually the mid to small stuff where it's not that it doesn't matter, but it's not worthwhile debating anymore. We may not totally agree. And so it's like whoever's going to be the big baby and own it a little bit more, great. You will have the full support of the other person. That's been how we've done it.
The big baby method. That's the first I've ever heard that. That is a genius. I think that's really great.
It's
Did
worked
you-
out okay so far.
That's good to hear. And now, one thing I like to ask business owners too is if I handed you a solution for this problem, like for this hiring problem, what would change the most about how you're running the business right now?
Honestly, not much, I don't think. Where my mind goes, it's funny, like when you ask the question, I hear more of like, hey, I'll eliminate this problem. What I've learned in building this business is effectively what you get when you solve a problem as a business owner, you just get the next problem. And so, will it change anything? No, because there'll be some other shit we have to figure out associated to us making more progress. And the key, and there's a guy, Blair Enns, if you're another agency, go check out Blair Enns and David C. Baker. They've got a podcast called The Two Bobs. They really help with the framing of thinking of it as a privilege. And so I don't think it would change much. I think tactically, if I really did have to answer, it would mean that I would be able to put more time into marketing that doesn't require our personal brands, because that is something we are going to have to build structurally as we
Hmm.
transition away from pure founder-led brand, founder-led operator, and founder-led consultancy, really. And so
Hmm.
that's things like thinking about content systems, thinking about outbound programs. It's not something we've had to really worry about with our personal growth, but it will be something as we hire and really try and get more and more projects and more people in the door.
Definitely. Now, looking at that obstacle, like what has kept it from being fully solved yet?
I think first and foremost, the unknown. Like this is the first time we built a business like this, and so like just being really honest and mindful of like we don't know what the hell we're doing in the right way. We've got good intuition about things. The other thing is I just think the people aspect is always going to be the toughest part of the business, and so that is a tricky transition for us because we built this with like we don't want to have a big team. I don't want to manage a lot of people. Unfortunately, and fortunately, we're at this point of growth where it's like okay, that's a requirement. um, and so I think that's the most challenging thing, just being mindful of like the human element, people's goals, people's aspirations. How do you be a good leader? How do you set them up for success? And then all of the, just human personal stuff that can come with that, right? As, from coaching and giving people the benefit of the doubt, all these things, we're kind of just going through our lumps and really figuring out how to structure that in a way that makes sense.
Definitely. Totally. Well, that's perfectly leads into my next question, which is where do you see the company going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yep. So for us, I guess I'll financially, we have goals to sort of set the structure for this. And so we're approximately a $2 million a year business to date. We are trying to figure out how we get the business to $5 million a year with us not owning every single project. And so we think that's very, very doable. There's a couple levers we have at play. Obviously, bringing more people in to run the projects, layering on more marketing programs. And then there's also stuff we can do with pricing simply because of our specialization and focus. You mentioned it earlier in the call, Kay. When you niche down and you truly become an expert in your space, and we're fortunate where if strategic positioning comes up in B2B technology, we usually get a conversation. There's power in that. And so we basically get a little price bonus of that. That's the goal. And, we're in it for the long haul. And so like, while we have these goals and maybe a timeline loosely in our heads, we're going to take the relatively slow road to get there, the more risk averse road. We're not going to go all in. We're going to try and do it bit by bit as we make progress.
Definitely. And what does that unlock for you personally? Like when you reach that goal, what does that do for you?
This is such a good question. Something that I've been really thoughtful about lately, especially with my wife, is like, is this a forever business? And even my work wife, my co-founder, is like, are we going to do this for 30 years? I think the short answer is no. When we started the business, we're both from the Midwest. None of us wants to be billionaire founders. We love when things work. We love growing and building things. Um, my assumption would be is I want pure financial security. So I have a number in my head that would set me and my family up without having to work in kind of the standard model. That's very appealing to me, or getting to more true freedom. And then ultimately, I think probably end up building more businesses, maybe leaning more into certain passions, but that's kind of where my head goes in that.
Ah, that's incredible. That's really cool to think about that. I'm also from the Midwest, so I get it.
It's our financial advisor. He's always cracking up because he's like, we've had some good years. And he's like, what do you guys do with the money? I'm like, I replaced my water heater. Like we were very like frugal mindset, and maybe not as much as our parents, but like for us, like a lavish, crazy lifestyle is a little bit more reserved than I think it is for most.
I feel that. Yep. I come from the same thing, replace the water heater.
Yeah, it's like, is it a scarcity mindset? Maybe, but it's ultimately to us like it hasn't become a negative thing. And so, finding out that balance of, how much does your lifestyle creep really balance against what makes you happy? Those are the types of things that, especially me and my wife are trying to figure out. It's like, we don't have to keep buying things. There's things we really love, and kind of staying within that range is really important.
Definitely. Now, when you look at that gap between today and the big picture, right? The big picture, what do you see as the biggest obstacle there in getting there?
Um, I think just sticking with it. I think there's a lot of risk in like any business of just burning out. And so
Yeah.
understanding that that's none of this is overnight success. And so even best case, we're talking 3 to 5 years out, and staying the course and staying consistent and finding ways to make the work feel interesting and fulfilling. And at the end of the day, like building businesses is really hard. It's a ton of work. As I mentioned, like there's always problems you have to deal with. It's a marathon. And so I think the obstacle will be trying to get there too quickly and looking for shortcuts, as well as just like wanting to get into something else. And I say that because I have peers and fellow entrepreneurs that I just see fall into that trap. It's something that
Mhm.
works, it starts to work, and then they get bored and burned out. And so then they spin into something completely new. And what I don't think they always see, and it's harder in the moment when you're feeling it, is like you're kind of starting over again, where it's like, man, staying power to me, I think is going to end up compounding more than anything else.
That's really true. That's a good point because I know business owners, myself included, can be subject to the shiny object syndrome.
We have this inside joke because this is another account fallacy that I learned in building the business. Going back to my comment of like, well, what business? Where's the opportunity? What do I build? That was always the first problem I had. As we got this thing off the ground and working and really learned how to build distribution and getting in front of a lot of prospects, I now see the world a little differently, where it's not that there's like very few opportunities. It's actually the exact opposite. There's too many opportunities. So you're like squirrel mentality. And what'll happen to every entrepreneur, I believe, is once you start having success, people are going to ask you to do other things. And so, like when we were building this positioning consultancy, we do this one thing. Granted, we would start building a lot of trust, and then these founders would be like, hey, can you help me with the next thing? Can you help me with my sales deck? What about my marketing program? And so they're throwing money at us, and that's risky, because what can happen is if you take that, you're going to start to pull your business apart operationally, marketing wise, and more importantly, recognition wise. And so the way
Yes.
we looked at it early on is, rather than having a portfolio of 50 products that are all going to be kind of shitty because there's 50 products, how can you do 50 things at the same time? We just want to have one product, and we want to be world class at it, and we want to sell it over and over.
Hmm.
And so the inside joke we have in our business is like, anytime there's this other opportunity for a deal, or someone's like, hey, they're going to pay us 50 grand to do this. The joke is like, oh, that's, it started as product number 2, product number 3. And now it's like, oh, that's product number 74. Just as a reminder of, stay focused on the core product, right? We're not ready to do that until we have this fully operationalized to go and take on more risk of moving into different spaces.
Definitely. Yeah, that's like spot on for a lot of businesses. And so, what is one thing you wish that people knew about your business that they maybe don't?
It's fun. It's kind of an interesting one to think about because we've done quite a bit of build in public. So
Hmm.
like we've been pretty transparent, where it's like most people know quite a bit about our business, at least the people in our little circle of the world. I think more echoing it for other entrepreneurs, especially consultants and service businesses, is the amount of consistency required, especially in the early days.
Hmm.
People you see everyone talks about overnight success. So like, and I've heard people like even say that about our business. Oh my God, you guys popped up and I see you everywhere now. It's like, it's not true at all. Like we were grinding away in the dark for like what feels like eternity. And we see this with a lot of our clients too, who are trying to figure out their marketing and get recognition, get exposure. It takes at minimum 6, 12, 18 months of just kind of talking into the void every day, whatever marketing channel and tactic you're using. And so I think it's just underappreciated, like how much it takes to commit to that. And I think, especially in AI's age of today, I think everyone's looking for a shortcut. So that would be the thing is like, hey, we don't use AI. Granted, we use it for certain things, but for the hard things, you just have to show up every day and stay consistent.
Yeah, that's a big one. I have a fun question for you now. If
Yeah.
I gave you a little magic dust and you could sprinkle that on one aspect of your business to rapidly improve it, what would you sprinkle it on?
Hmm. It would be, well, yeah, I'd want you to fix my hiring my hiring and structure problem, but I already kind of alluded to that. I think the other magic dust would be our next acquisition channel. And so we've been big believers in one channel, one tactic, and again, showing up with consistency. We are now, I would say, in more of an experimentation phase of what do we do for our next piece? Do we do a newsletter? Is it a podcast? Is it sending outbound? Um, so like all of them can work in a way. It's a combination of which one can we figure out and which one are we willing to stick with. I'll take some magic fairy dust on that of just picking the one and having it work and having it all stood up. That'd be great.
Well, you definitely have a good voice for podcasting, so
Thank you for that. I'll give the credit to the mic, but it is funny. Like we do our whole business on Zooms, and I've gotten a range of we'll say compliments from I should do ASMR, I should read audiobooks, I should be on the radio, and it's like, okay, maybe I'm in the wrong career, and maybe you just helped me get discovered. Okay, that's just what happens.
we could talk about that. Oh, this has been such a fun conversation. I would love to connect the audience with you. So how can people connect with you and your company online?
LinkedIn is the best place to start. So go follow myself, Rob Kaminski, and my co-founder, Anthony Pieri. And if you're in the B2B technology space, come check us out at our website, fletchpmm.com. Get a little more insight into exactly what we do and how we do it.
Incredible, incredible. Well, thank you again for this conversation. We have one final question. What is most inspiring to you today?
Hmm. I take a lot of inspiration from other founders that are building kind of those long-term durable businesses without taking money. And so I've always been a huge fan of the guys over at 37 Signals, DAH and Jason Fried. Just love what they're doing. Obviously, they built a massive company. And then sort of mixing in just on the solo consulting front, I think of guys like Justin Welsh, who's sort of kind of rewriting his own rules about, how does he make money and his lifestyle and revenue. I'd love seeing stuff like that where it really creates opportunity for lifestyle design. And that really calls to me just from a freedom standpoint.
Very cool. Yeah, I just looked up Justin. I'm going to check that out. That sounds really incredible. So, again, Rob, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a joy to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me, Kay. It was a blast.